He paid her to carry one baby. Now she's pregnant with twins, and he wants everything. Asterisk Victoria Cross stood outside the towering glass building of Sterling Enterprises, her hands trembling as she clutched the contract that would change her life forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble entrance, but nothing could warm the cold fear settling in her chest. She was a nurse, used to helping others heal, but today she was here to make a deal that would test every boundary she had ever set for herself. Inside the luxurious office on the 40th floor, Damian Sterling sat behind his mahogany desk, his steel blue eyes studying the financial reports spread before him. At 35, he had built an empire from nothing, but success had come at a cost. His marriage had crumbled under the weight of his ambition, and his ex-wife had taken everything except his ability to have children naturally. Now, with his board demanding stability and his mother pressuring him for an heir, he had turned to the one solution that made business sense. Victoria entered the office, her nurse's uniform replaced by a simple blue dress that made her green eyes appear even brighter. She had researched surrogacy agencies for weeks, but none offered the financial compensation that could save her younger brother's life. Tommy needed surgery that insurance wouldn't cover, and the medical bills were mounting faster than her modest salary could handle. "Miss Cross," Damian said without looking up from his papers, "I trust you've read the contract thoroughly." Victoria nodded, though her voice caught slightly. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Everything seems clear, but I have some concerns." For the first time, Damian raised his eyes to meet hers. Something flickered across his expression, though he quickly masked it with professional coldness. "The terms are non-negotiable. $100,000 for carrying one child to term. All medical expenses covered, plus a housing allowance during the pregnancy." "What if there are complications?" Victoria asked, her medical training making her consider all possibilities. "Then we deal with them as they arise," Damian replied curtly. "The contract includes provisions for medical emergencies. Your job is simply to carry my child safely." Victoria felt the weight of his words. Not our child or even the child, but my child. She thought of Tommy lying in the hospital bed, his pale face lighting up whenever she visited. At 19, he had his whole life ahead of him, but only if she could afford the surgery he desperately needed. "I need to know that my brother will be taken care of if anything happens to me," she said quietly. Damian studied her for a long moment. "Your brother's medical bills will be paid regardless of the outcome. That's not in the contract, but you have my word." Something in his tone made Victoria believe him. She picked up the pen with shaking hands and signed her name at the bottom of the contract. The ink seemed to seal more than just a business arrangement. It bound her to a man she barely knew for the most intimate journey two people could share. "There's one more thing," Damian said as he took the signed papers. "During the pregnancy, you'll live in the penthouse apartment I've arranged. It's fully furnished and staffed. We'll have access to the best medical care money can buy." "Is that really necessary?" Victoria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "My child deserves the best possible start in life," Damian replied. "That includes ensuring the mother has no stress or financial worries during the pregnancy." As Victoria left the office that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just entered into something far more complicated than a simple business transaction. The way Damian had looked at her, the careful way he had structured the contract, the penthouse apartment, it all suggested a level of control that went beyond protecting an investment. 3 weeks later, Victoria received the call that would change everything. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, her assigned physician, delivered news that neither Victoria nor Damian had anticipated. "Congratulations, Victoria," Dr. Martinez said with a warm smile. "You're pregnant with twins?" The ultrasound image on the screen showed 2 tiny heartbeats, flickering like stars in the darkness. Victoria stared at the monitor, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, trying to process what she was seeing. 2 babies. The contract had been very specific about one child, and now everything had become infinitely more complicated. "You certain, Dr. Martinez?" Victoria asked, though the evidence was clear before her eyes. "Absolutely certain," the doctor confirmed. 2 healthy embryos, both developing normally. It's not uncommon with fertility treatments. though it does change things significantly. Victoria's mind raced through the implications. The contract, the payment, Damien's expectations, none of it had accounted for twins. She thought about calling him immediately, but something held her back. She needed time to think, to understand what this meant for her and for Tommy. Meanwhile, Damien Sterling was in the middle of a board meeting when his assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Mr. Sterling, Dr. Martinez is on line 1. She says it's urgent regarding the pregnancy." Damien excused himself and took the call in his private office. When Dr. Martinez delivered the news, his reaction was immediate and intense. "Twins," he repeated, his voice barely controlled. "You absolutely certain?" "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Both babies appear healthy, but this does complicate the arrangement significantly." After hanging up, Damien sat in his leather chair, staring out at the city skyline. His first instinct was to contact his lawyer to understand the legal implications of this unexpected development. But another part of him, a part he had tried to bury under years of ruthless business dealings, felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Wonder. 2 children. 2 chances at the family legacy his mother had always demanded. 2 opportunities. To prove he could be the father his own had never been, Victoria returned to the luxurious penthouse apartment that had become her temporary home. The space was beautiful but sterile, filled with expensive furniture that had never been chosen with love or care. She sat on the plush sofa and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the situation. Her phone rang, and Damien's name appeared on the screen. She had been expecting this call, but it still made her heart race. "Victoria, we need to talk." His voice was tight with barely contained emotion. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Damien arrived, he looked different than she had ever seen him. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened, his dark hair mussed, as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Dr. Martinez called," he said without preamble. "Twins?" "Yes," Victoria replied simply, studying his face for any clue about his reaction. "The contract doesn't cover this situation," Damien continued, beginning to pace the spacious living room. "Legally, we're in uncharted territory." "What are you saying?" Victoria asked, though she feared she already knew. Damien stopped pacing and turned to face her. "I'm saying that everything has changed. 2 children means double the responsibility, double the risk, double the—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Double the everything." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you asking me to make a choice between them?" "No," Damien said quickly, and she saw something flash in his eyes that looked almost like horror. "That's not what I'm saying at all. Then what are you saying?" Damien sat down across from her, his business mask finally slipping completely. "I'm saying that I want both children. I want to double the compensation, provide everything you need for a healthy pregnancy with twins, and ensure that you and they have the best possible care." Victoria blinked in surprise. "You want both babies?" as Damien said firmly. "But I also want to change the terms of our arrangement." "How so?" "I want you to stay," he said quietly. "It's not just during the pregnancy, but after. I want you to be their mother in every sense of the word." Victoria's heart pounded. "Mr. Sterling, that's not what we agreed to." "I know," Damien replied, "but twins change everything. They'll need their mother and I." He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. "I think I need you too." The mission hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they were ready to cross. Victoria looked at this powerful man who had just revealed a crack in his armor, and she realized that somewhere in the midst of contracts and medical appointments, something unexpected had begun to grow between them. "I need time to think," she said finally. Of course Damien agreed. "But Victoria, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll honor our original agreement. Your brother will be taken care of, and you'll be compensated fairly for carrying my children." As he prepared to leave, Victoria called out to him, "Damien, why do you really want me to stay?" He turned back, and for a moment, she saw past the businessman to the man beneath. "Because in all my years of making deals and building empires, I've never met anyone who made me want to build a home instead." The morning sickness hit Victoria like a wave, forcing her to grip the marble bathroom counter as her stomach churned. Carrying twins was proving to be more challenging than she had expected, and at 12 weeks her body was already showing signs of the double burden she carried. Dr. Martinez had warned her that twin pregnancies often involved more complications, more fatigue, and more emotional intensity. What she hadn't warned her about was how Damien Sterling would react to every symptom, every discomfort, every change in her condition. "You need to eat," Damien said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with a concerned expression. He had taken to checking on her several times throughout the day, often bringing food or simply sitting nearby while she rested. "I'm trying," Victoria replied, attempting to keep down the ginger tea that had become her constant companion. "The babies don't seem to appreciate anything I eat these days." "My babies," Damien corrected automatically, then stopped. He had been saying that phrase less frequently lately, and Victoria had begun to wonder if he'd even noticed the change.
"Our
"Babies," Victoria said softly, testing the words. "While they're inside me, they're our babies." Damien's eyes met hers, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Our babies," he repeated, and the word "our" seemed to carry more weight than any contract ever could. Over the following weeks, their relationship began to evolve in ways neither had anticipated. Damien would arrive each morning with fresh flowers and different foods to tempt Victoria's changing appetite. He read pregnancy books voraciously, often sharing facts about fetal development that made Victoria smile despite her discomfort. "Did you know that at 16 weeks they can already hear sounds from outside the womb?" Damien said one evening as they sat together on the couch, Victoria's feet elevated on pillows. "Yes, I learned that in nursing school," Victoria replied, placing her hand on her growing belly. "Sometimes I talk to them." "What do you say?" Damien asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Victoria blushed slightly. "I tell them about the world they're coming into, about their father who works so hard to provide for them, about their Uncle Tommy who can't wait to meet them." "Uncle Tommy?" Damien raised an eyebrow. "My brother," Victoria explained. "So much better since the surgery. Talks about the babies constantly, already planning all the things he wants to teach them." Damien was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to meet him, really?" Victoria was surprised. Damien had never expressed interest in any aspect of her life beyond the pregnancy. "If he's going to be their uncle, I should know him," Damien said practically. But Victoria sensed there was more to it than that. The next week, Damien accompanied Victoria to visit Tommy in the rehabilitation center where he was recovering from his surgery. Victoria watched nervously as the two most important men in her life met for the first time. Tommy, despite being only 19, possessed a maturity that his illness had forced upon him. He studied Damien with the same careful assessment that Victoria had seen him use with doctors and nurses. "So you're the guy who's making my sister look like she swallowed a basketball," Tommy said with a grin that was pure mischief. "Tommy." Victoria scolded, but Damien actually laughed. "2 basketballs." "Technically," Damien replied. "Twins tend to make things more interesting." "Victoria says you're some kind of business genius," Tommy continued, his tone becoming more serious. "But what I want to know is, are you going to take care of my sister and those babies?" Victoria held her breath, waiting for Damien's response. She had seen him handle hostile board members and aggressive competitors, but something about Tommy's direct question seemed to catch him off guard. "I'm going to try," Damien said finally. "I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure they're safe and happy." "Trying isn't good enough," Tommy said firmly. "Victoria deserves someone who will do more than try." "Tommy, please," Victoria began, but Damien held up a hand. "He's right," Damien said quietly. "Victoria deserves better than someone who just tries. She deserves someone who succeeds." As they left the rehabilitation center, Victoria walked beside Damien in comfortable silence. The autumn air was crisp, and she pulled her coat tighter around her expanding middle. "Your brother is impressive," Damien said eventually. "He reminds me of you. How so?" "He's protective of the people he loves. Even when it costs him something," Damien replied. "Even when he's the one who needs protection." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "Is that how you see me?" "See you as someone who sacrificed her own comfort to save someone she loves," Damien said, his voice growing husky. Someone who agreed to carry a stranger's child because family meant more than fear. And now? Victoria asked, her heart pounding. Now I see you as someone who's teaching me what it means to put someone else's needs before your own, Damien admitted. Someone who's showing me that maybe I can be more than just a successful businessman. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Damien, I need you to know that these babies, they're not just yours anymore. They're part of me too. When they're born. It's going to be harder than either of us expected. I know, Damien said softly. And I'm hoping that when the time comes, you'll help me figure out how to be the kind of father they deserve. As they continued walking, Victoria realized that somewhere between morning sickness and baby books, between contract negotiations and quiet conversations, she had fallen in love with the man who had hired her to carry his children. The question now was whether he could love her back, or if she would always be just the woman who had given him the family he wanted. At 28 weeks, Victoria's pregnancy took a dangerous turn. She woke up in the middle of the night with severe cramping and immediately called Dr. Martinez. Within an hour, she was in the hospital, hooked up to monitors that tracked both her vital signs and the twins' heartbeats. Preeclampsia, Dr. Martinez explained to Damien, who had arrived at the hospital still in his pajamas, his hair disheveled and his eyes wild with worry. Victoria's blood pressure has spiked dangerously. Hi, we need to monitor her closely and may need to deliver the babies early if her condition worsens. Damien stared at the monitors surrounding Victoria's bed, watching the numbers that represented not just his children's lives, but the life of the woman who had become so much more than a surrogate to him. What does that mean exactly? He asked, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. It means we wait and see, Dr. Martinez replied. Victoria needs complete bed rest, minimal stress, and constant monitoring. The babies are viable now, but every day they stay in the womb gives them a better chance. For the next week, Damien barely left Victoria's side. He moved his office to the hospital room, conducting meetings via video call and handling Sterling Enterprises from a plastic chair beside her bed. Victoria protested that he didn't need to stay, but Damien refused to leave. This is where I need to be, he said firmly when she tried to convince him to go home. You're carrying my children, and you're risking your life to do it. The least I can do is be here. Our children, Victoria corrected weakly, and Damien's face softened. Our children, he agreed, taking her hand in his. And you're their mother in every way that matters. The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Victoria squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm that spoke of work and determination. Damien, I need to tell you something, she said quietly. In case something happens to me. Nothing is going to happen to you, Damien said fiercely. I won't let it. You can't control everything, Victoria replied with a sad smile. But what I need you to know is that I love you. I love you, and I love these babies, and I need you to promise me that if something happens, you'll tell them that their mother loved them from the moment she knew they existed. Damien's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for days. Victoria, I promise me, she insisted, her grip on his hand tightening despite her weakness. I promise, Damien whispered, but I also promise that you're going to be here. To tell them yourself. That night, as Victoria slept fitfully under the watchful eye of the monitors, Damien sat in the darkness and confronted truths he had been avoiding. He loved her. Not just as the mother of his children, not just as a business arrangement gone unexpectedly personal, but as the woman who had shown him what it meant to love someone more than himself. The next morning brought both hope and fear. Victoria's blood pressure had stabilized slightly, but the babies were showing signs of distress. Dr. Martinez gathered the team for a consultation while Damien paced the hallway outside. We need to make a decision, the doctor said when she emerged. Victoria's condition is stable for now, but the babies are struggling. We can try to give them a few more weeks, or we can deliver them now via cesarean section. What are the risks? Damien asked, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. If we wait, Victoria's condition could worsen rapidly. If we deliver now, the babies will need intensive care, but they have a good chance of surviving and thriving. Damien looked through the window at Victoria, who was awake and watching them with anxious eyes. What does Victoria want? What does Victoria want? To talk to you, Dr. Martinez replied. Damien entered the room and sat beside Victoria's bed. She looked pale and fragile, but her eyes held the same determination he had seen the day she signed their contract. They need to come out, don't they?
Out,
She asked without preamble. Dr. Martinez thinks it would be safer for everyone, Damien replied carefully. Victoria nodded slowly. I can feel them struggling. They're fighters, just like their father, just like their mother, Damien corrected. Victoria, I need you to know that whatever happens, you've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. You've given me a family, and you've given me love I didn't know I deserved. You deserve everything good in this world, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. And these babies are going to be so lucky to have you as their father. They're going to be lucky to have you as their mother, Damien replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Because that's what you are, Victoria. You're their mother, and you're the woman I love. Victoria's eyes widened in surprise. You love? Me. I love you, Damien confirmed. I love your strength, your compassion, your ability to make me want to be better than I am. I love the way you talk to the babies. It's the way you put everyone else's needs before your own. The way you've made me believe in family again. I love you too, Victoria whispered. More than I ever thought possible. 2 hours later, Victoria was wheeled into surgery. As the anesthesia took effect, her last conscious thought was of Damien's hand holding hers, and his voice whispering promises of love and forever. The surgery lasted 3 hours. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the operating room, Damien was waiting with Tommy, who had insisted on being there despite his own recovery. 2 healthy baby girls, the doctor announced with a tired smile. Small but strong. Victoria did beautifully. She's going to be fine. Damien closed his eyes and said a prayer of gratitude to whatever forces had brought Victoria and the babies safely through the ordeal. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the nursery of their new home, watching Damien feed baby Grace, while baby Hope slept peacefully in her crib. The twins had spent their first month in the NICU, but they had proven to be fighters, just as their parents had predicted. She's got your determination, Victoria said softly, watching Grace grip Damien's finger with tiny but fierce hands. She's got your stubbornness, Damien replied with a grin. And Hope has your gentle spirit. They both have your intelligence, Victoria countered. Look how they study everything around them. The house they had chosen together was nothing like Damien's sterile penthouse or Victoria's cramped apartment. It was a family home, with a big kitchen for family dinners, a backyard for the girls to play in when they were older, and a guest room that Tommy had already claimed as his own. Do you ever regret it? Damien asked quietly, his eyes still on. Grace, giving up your independence for this chaos. Victoria moved to sit beside him on the rocking chair, careful not to disturb the baby. Do you regret giving up your bachelor lifestyle for midnight feedings and diaper changes? Never, Damien said without hesitation. This is the best deal I've ever made. It wasn't a deal, Victoria corrected. It was a gift. You gave me Tommy's health, and I gave you daughters. But somewhere along the way, we gave each other something even more valuable. What's that? Love? Victoria said simply. Real, honest, forever love. Damien leaned over and kissed her softly. The contract never mentioned love. The best things never do, Victoria replied. They just happen when you're not looking. As they sat together in the quiet nursery, watching their daughters sleep, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had walked into Damien's office as a desperate woman willing to carry a stranger's child for money. She was leaving as a mother, a wife, and a partner in the most important business venture of their lives, building a family. I have something for you, Damien said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. I meant to give this to you at the hospital, but things got complicated. Victoria opened the box to find a simple but elegant diamond ring. Damien, we're already married, she said, confused. Legally, yes, he replied, but that was just paperwork. This is me asking you to marry me for real. To be my wife, not because of a contract, but because I can't imagine my life without you. Victoria looked at the ring, then at Damien, than at their sleeping daughters. Are you asking me to marry you while we're both covered in baby food and running on 3 hours of sleep? I'm asking you to marry me because you're covered in baby food and running on 3 hours of sleep. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, Damien replied. I'm asking you to marry me because you've shown me what it means to be a family. Yes, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry you. For real this time. As Damien slipped the ring onto her finger, Grace stirred in his arms and opened her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to study her parents with the same intensity her father was known for in the boardroom. I think she approves, Victoria whispered. She'd better, Damien replied. She's stuck with us. Tommy appeared in the doorway, moving slowly but steadily on his own 2 feet. Are you two getting mushy in here again? Because Hope is starting to wake up, and I think she's ready for her Aunt Victoria. Uncle Tommy? Victoria corrected with a smile. And yes, we're getting mushy. We're also getting married. Again, about time, Tommy said with a grin. I was beginning to think Damien was never going to make an honest woman out of you. I was an honest woman when I met him, Victoria protested. He's the one who needed reforming. Hey, Damien said in mock offense. I'm a perfectly respectable businessman. You're a perfectly respectable husband and father, Victoria corrected. The businessman was just practice. As the family gathered around the cribs, watching Hope and Grace sleep peacefully, Victoria marveled at how much had changed in less than a year. She had entered into a business arrangement and found a love story. She had agreed to carry one baby and ended up with twins. She had planned to walk away after 9 months and instead found herself building a forever family. Do you think they'll ask about the contract someday? Victoria asked quietly. Probably, Damien replied. Ack! And when they do, we'll tell them the truth. That sometimes the best things in life start with the most unexpected beginnings. And that love finds a way, Victoria added, settling into the rocking chair with Hope, who had indeed woken up and was demanding attention. And that their parents would do it all again in a heartbeat, Damien said, holding Grace close and watching his wife feed their daughter. As the sun set outside the nursery window, the Sterling family settled into their evening routine. Was nothing like the sterile business arrangement that had brought them together, and everything like the chaotic, loving, imperfect family they had become. Victoria looked at her husband, her daughters, and her brother, and knew that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most practical contracts. Love, she had learned, was the greatest negotiation of all, and she and Damien had both won everything they never knew they wanted. The twins grew strong and healthy, filled with their mother's compassion and their father's determination. Tommy finished his recovery and went on to study medicine, inspired by his sister's courage and his niece's fighting spirit. And Damien Sterling, once known only as a ruthless businessman, became known as a devoted husband and father who had learned that the most successful ventures were built on love, not just ambition. Their story had begun with a contract, but it would continue with a promise that no legal document could ever capture: to love, honor, and cherish each other through whatever complications life might bring. And in the end, that was the only deal that truly mattered.